Year 23 of the reign of Thutmose III, northern frontier fortress of Tjaru. In a low, smoky audience chamber at Egypt's Asiatic gateway, scribes slide fresh clay tablets across a polished stone table. Messengers from Canaan have arrived again, dusty, exhausted, bearing the same familiar complaint written in the same familiar script. Another revolt, another coalition of restless city-states in the hill country refusing tribute, dragging their feet on shipments of copper, timber, and grain, whispering to distant foreign kings. The elders of the court of the Egyptian pharaohs are not impressed. They have seen this pattern for generations. Canaanite princes quarrel among themselves, swear loyalty, break oaths, flirt with rebellion, and in the end, bow when Egyptian chariots appear on the horizon. The borderlands have always been noisy, always troublesome, but never truly dangerous. To them, this is just more static at the edge of empire. They laugh quietly as they read the complaints. Let them shout, let them posture. When the pharaoh tightens his grip, they will kneel as they always have. But this time, the noise at the edge of empire is different. Across the highlands and valleys of Canaan, messengers race from city to city. Seals from Kadesh, from Megiddo, from dozens of smaller towns press into wet clay. A single idea threads through every message. Throw off Egyptian rule now, or be crushed one by one later. Megiddo is the keystone. The city sits perched at the mouth of a broad valley, astride the main highway that links Egypt to Syria and Mesopotamia. Caravans of merchants, pack animals, and soldiers all funnel through this choke point. Whoever holds Megiddo controls the flow of trade, tribute, and armies between the Nile and the northern kingdoms. Whoever holds Megiddo can threaten the lifeline of Egyptian power in Asia. The Canaanite coalition believes the Egyptian pharaohs have grown complacent. The temples of Amun rise higher each year. The court in Thebes is busy with rituals, festivals, and building projects. Egypt's gaze, they decide, is turned inward, locked on the Nile. The borderlands have become an afterthought. They gamble that this revolt will be different. If Megiddo stands, the empire cracks. On the Nile, a younger king is waiting for exactly this moment. Thutmose III has lived much of his life in the shadow of a formidable woman, his stepmother, Hatshepsut. For years she ruled as king, in all but name, while he learned command in the background. Now she is gone. The crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt rest directly on his head. The revolt in Canaan is not just a border crisis, it is his first great test as a warrior pharaoh. The Egyptian pharaohs have always claimed dominion over Retjenu, the lands of Canaan and Syria. Thutmose decides he will not merely preserve that claim. He will prove it in blood. Orders move faster than the Nile current. From Memphis to Thebes, scribes copy royal decrees. Chariots are inspected and refitted. Bronze is hammered into spearheads and arrowheads. Quivers are filled. Composite bows are strung and unstrung to test their flex. Granaries are opened, donkeys loaded, riverboats assigned to carry grain, beer, and dried meat to the frontier. Egypt is about to do something no Canaanite prince expects. Move fast. The army of Thutmose III gathers at Tjaru, the northeastern gate of Egypt. It is a compact but lethal force of seasoned infantry, archers, and charioteers, hardened by desert marches and border skirmishes, organized into regiments of Amun, Ra, and Ptah. Chariot crews polish their leather armor and harness. Horses snort and stamp in the dust. The march begins. They move out along the coastal road, hugging the line where sand and sea almost meet. 10 days to Gaza, the familiar staging point of earlier campaigns. The army rests briefly, then pushes on. 11 more days to Yehem, a small point on the map wedged against the shoulders of Mount Carmel. Here, the road to Megiddo splits into 3. A northern route swings wide, bending safely around the hills. A southern route loops below, passing near Tanakh, broad and open. Between them runs a narrow gorge, the Aruna Pass, a steep and twisting cut through the hills. It is shorter, faster, and, if an enemy is waiting, suicidal. Thutmose summons his commanders to council. Generals with scarred faces and graying hair point to the map with their staffs. They urge the northern or southern road. If the Egyptians march through the Aruna Pass, they explain, the army must go single file for long stretches. Chariots will be trapped in a line, unable to maneuver. A single rockfall, a single ambush could cripple the entire expedition. No sensible commander risks his whole army in such a bottleneck. But Thutmose is thinking about something else. If his own generals are sure he will not take the Aruna Pass, then so, he reasons, are the Canaanite kings. The coalition has had time to collect intelligence, to watch Egyptian movements, to predict their habits. They will guard the safe roads heavily, confident that no pharaoh would be reckless enough to thread his army through the gorge. He makes his decision. Thutmose III chooses speed over safety. He orders the entire army of the Egyptian pharaohs into the Aruna Pass. The march becomes a test of nerve. The gorge is narrow and shadowed. Sheer rock walls rise on either side. Chariots creak and sway as they edge along, single file. Pack animals stumble, hooves scraping stone. Archers, infantry, and camp followers are compressed into a living column of men and beasts, stretching for miles. One rockfall, one disciplined enemy ambush, and the story of Egypt's empire might end here in a shattered procession of broken wheels and crushed bodies. But when Egyptian scouts emerge from the far end of the pass, they do not meet a killing ground. They ride out into the open valley. The Canaanite coalition has taken the bait. Their main forces watch the safer roads, waiting for an army that will never come that way. By the time they realize what has happened, the Egyptian pharaohs have performed a maneuver as shocking in their age as a deep armored thrust in the age of tanks. Thutmose's army has cut straight through the middle, stepping out between the scattered Canaanite positions and the fortress of Megiddo itself. For the first time, the Canaanite kings understand that this pharaoh is not the complacent ritual ruler they expected. The laughter stops. As dawn breaks over the plain in front of Megiddo, the two armies form for battle. On one side, the forces of the Egyptian pharaohs, ranks of shield-bearing infantry, archers with recurved bows, and lines of sleek war chariots drawn up in disciplined order. Perhaps 10,000 infantry and 1,000 chariots, their numbers carefully tallied by royal scribes. On the other side, the coalition of Canaanite city-states, warriors from Kadesh, Megiddo, and their allies, charioteers and spearmen, fighting not just for loyalty, but for the chance to break free of Egyptian rule. Thutmose III arranges his army in 3 wings, forming a shallow crescent that threatens both Canaanite flanks. He places himself in the center, standing in a chariot clad with electrum, shining like the sun's disk, a living symbol of Ra in motion. When the signal is given, the Egyptian left wing surges forward. Horses scream and lunge, wheels hammer the earth. Archers loose volleys of arrows in deadly arcs that fall like black rain on the Canaanite lines. The center pushes in behind, turning the crescent into a tightening jaw. The Canaanite line buckles almost immediately. This is not a slow grind of shield against shield. It is a shock, sudden and violent. Chariots explode through weak points. Infantry spear thrusts rip apart loose formations. The coalition army, formed in haste and burdened with divided loyalties, cannot hold. Within hours, the field fractures. Canaanite warriors break and run. Kings and princes who planned to end Egyptian dominance now fight to reach their own fortress alive. The casualties mount. Thousands of coalition fighters lie dead or dying in the dust. Egyptian bodies are scattered among them, but in far smaller numbers. The plain in front of Megiddo is littered with broken chariots, fallen horses, snapped spears, and abandoned shields. At this moment, Egypt stands on the edge of total victory. If the Egyptian pharaohs had driven their chariots straight for the city gates in the first panic, Megiddo might have fallen in a single day. The fleeing kings and nobles, trapped outside the walls with no time to organize, could have been captured or cut down where they ran. The revolt would have ended that afternoon in a storm of dust and splintered doors. Instead, human nature intervenes. As the Canaanite army collapses, Egyptian soldiers do what victorious soldiers have done in every age. They stop to loot the enemy camp. What they find is astonishing. Chariots by the hundreds, some plated with bronze and inlaid with precious metals. Suits of scale armor, fine bows and quivers, tents filled with garments, jewelry, elaborate harnesses, and the richly decorated gear of the kings of Kadesh and Megiddo themselves. The camp represents the concentrated wealth of an entire coalition of city-states, piled up and left undefended in the rush to the walls. Scribes will later record the tally in proud detail on temple walls. Hundreds of captured chariots, scores of suits of armor, thousands of animals, and a mountain of spoils. It will be remembered as one of the greatest hauls in the annals of the Egyptian pharaohs. But in the shadow of Megiddo's walls, that triumph hides a strategic mistake. While Egyptian soldiers strip tents and seize chariots, the surviving Canaanite leaders reach the city. The gates are already closed. Defenders on the walls improvise with desperate speed. They knot garments into makeshift ropes and lower them down over the ramparts. One by one, kings, princes, and elite warriors are hauled up the sheer walls, dragged to safety inside the fortress. By the time Thutmose realizes what is happening, it is too late to stop it. He has won the Battle of Megiddo on the open plain, but the head of the revolt now hides behind stone and timber. The price of that delay will be 7 months. Egyptian engineers go to work. Around Megiddo, the army digs a moat and raises a wooden palisade, effectively building a wall around the city's wall. The proud Canaanite fortress becomes a prison, sealed off from its allies, surrounded by enemy watchfires and patrols. The siege grinds on. Inside Megiddo, defenders ration food and water, watching their storehouses shrink day by day. Outside, Egyptian soldiers endure boredom, heat, disease, and the strain of holding a long line for months on foreign soil. Supply columns have to snake back along the very roads the army marched, bringing grain, water, and equipment from Gaza and from Egypt itself. Every extra month of siege is a risk. Each passing week gives distant powers like Mitanni more time to consider pressing into Syrian territories. Each passing week leaves the main Egyptian army fixed in place deep in Canaan, far from the heartland along the Nile. Each passing week tests whether the Egyptian pharaohs truly have the logistical strength to maintain a forward siege, or whether their enemies' calculations were right, that Egypt cannot sustain prolonged warfare far from home. A plague in the camp, a major revolt elsewhere, an unexpected crisis on the Nile, any of these could turn Megiddo from a showcase of power into a trap. But discipline holds. Month after month, the noose tightens. Fields near Megiddo are burned. Outlying villages bend the knee and send tribute to the Egyptian camp. Caravans that once passed freely now deal only with Egypt. The fortress slowly starves behind its own walls. At last, hunger and fear do what swords could not. Envoys emerge from Megiddo's gate, carrying tokens of submission, bowing low before Thutmose III. They plead for mercy. The gates open. Egyptian scribes step forward with writing palettes and rolls of papyrus, ready to record the terms and tally the spoils. The list is staggering. Prisoners of rank, kings, princes, and nobles. Horses and foals by the thousands. Cattle and sheep in numbers that make scribes pause to recheck their figures. Hundreds of chariots, dozens of suits of armor, heaps of weapons and luxury goods. The royal chariot and armor of the Prince of Megiddo himself are surrendered, symbols of a broken rebellion. Thutmose orders that the city be spared from total destruction. The fortress is too important, too well placed on the trade routes to waste. Megiddo will not be reduced to rubble. It will become a loyal node in an Egyptian network of power. But he does something else, something colder and more long-sighted. He commands that the sons of defeated Canaanite kings and nobles be taken back to Egypt. There, in the courts and temples along the Nile, they will be raised in the language, customs, and religion of the Egyptian pharaohs. They will grow up seeing Egyptian power not as distant oppression, but as the normal order of the world. When they eventually return to rule their cities, they will rule as clients, not enemies. Megiddo has forced a transformation in Egyptian strategy. The pharaohs have learned, at great cost, that Canaanite revolts can no longer be treated as minor border irritants. The coalition that rallied around Megiddo proved that a united front in the hill country can threaten the empire's northern lifeline. The Egyptian response, rapid march, bold maneuver, prolonged siege, and political restructuring marks the beginning of a new phase in imperial control. In the years that follow, Thutmose III will campaign again and again in Canaan and Syria. He will push Egyptian influence deep into the north, fighting not just for plunder, but for lasting dominance over trade routes and vassal kings. Megiddo will be remembered as his first great victory, the battle that established his reputation. But behind the glory carved in stone lies the narrower truth. Megiddo shows how close the Egyptian pharaohs came to losing their grip on the north because they underestimated Canaanite revolts. They laughed at petitions and complaints from the hill country until the coalition had already formed. They nearly turned a decisive battlefield victory into a prolonged strategic strain by pausing to loot instead of seizing the city in the first rush. They learned that in the age of chariots and fortified hill towns, arrogance can be as deadly as any spear. The story that begins with Egyptian officials smirking over clay tablets at Tjaru ends with a ring of Egyptian campfires around Megiddo, a starving garrison, and humbled Canaanite kings sending their sons as hostages to the Nile. Egyptian pharaohs laughed at Canaanite revolts until Megiddo nearly cost them an empire.